I paid for a private meeting with an OnlyFans model, and less than 1 hour later, I was tied to a chair while 3 men forced me to empty every crypto wallet I owned. Every step had been prepared in advance, and I walked straight into it without noticing. If you think this kind of thing only happens to careless people, then you are already thinking the same way I was before it happened. I worked as a crypto trader, and most of my life happens inside my apartment. I was making good money. I was careful with my accounts, and I thought that was enough to stay safe. OnlyFans started as a distraction with the routine. Most profiles felt fake or distant, but then I found one that felt direct and consistent. And that difference made me stay longer than I planned. She remembered the details, responded fast, and kept conversations. That trust is what made everything possible, and the moment I accepted her offer, the situation turned into something designed around me. One night, she sent me a message that was different from everything before. She explained that she offered a VIP experience for select clients, and that it included private sessions, direct contact, and the option to meet in person under strict conditions. She made it sound exclusive enough that saying no felt like missing something. I took time to think about it, but I had been talking to her long enough to feel like I understood her, and that false sense of familiarity made the situation feel safer than it was. When I finally agreed, she sent me the address and a list of instructions that I followed without questioning. The building looked completely normal, which made it easier to believe everything was fine. I checked the address twice before going in, and everything matched, so I walked to the apartment and stopped at the door for a moment before knocking. That pause mattered more than I realized, because it was the last moment where I could have left without consequences. She opened the door quickly and greeted me in the same tone she used online, and that consistency lowered my guard again. Inside, the apartment looked clean but empty, with almost no personal items. We talked for a while. The conversation shifted slowly, and she suggested turning things into a controlled scenario where she would take the lead, explaining it as something she had done before. And I agreed, even though I understood I was giving up control in a place I did not know. That decision is what made everything that followed possible. Before anything started, I noticed how quiet the apartment had become, and I realized I could not hear anything from outside or from other units, which made the space feel isolated. That silence stayed in the background while she moved around the room, preparing everything. She asked me to sit on the bed and relax, and I followed her instructions because I still believed I was choosing to be there. She tied my wrists with firm knots and secured my ankles the same way, leaving just enough movement to feel controlled but not enough to escape. I tested the restraint slightly, and she told me to stop moving and trust her. And I did, even though something felt off. After that, she placed a blindfold over my eyes, and the loss of vision forced me to rely entirely on sound. I could hear her walking around adjusting something, and moving from one side of the room to the other, and at first, everything felt like part of the situation. I stayed still and waited. Time passed without any contact, and the silence stretched longer than expected, which made me question what was happening. I called her name in a controlled tone, expecting a quick response, but there was nothing, and that absence changed everything. I called again, louder this time, but the silence did not break, and that is when the situation stopped feeling like a setup and started feeling like a mistake. I stayed still for a few seconds, trying to focus on any sound that could explain what was happening, but I could not hear her anywhere in the room. I pulled against the restraints with more force, testing if I could free myself, but the knots held and tightened against my skin. I raised my voice and called her again, but there was no answer, and at that point, I knew she was not coming back. The tension kept building while I was waiting for any sounds that could explain what was happening outside. When it finally opened, the impact against the wall made it clear that whoever entered did not care about being quiet. I heard multiple footsteps moving quickly toward me, and the weight of those steps made it clear there was more than one person. Hands gripped me without hesitation, and the force they used made it clear this was not confusion or a misunderstanding. One person held my chest down while another forced my arms back, increasing the pressure on my shoulders in a way that caused immediate pain. I tried to push back, but the position I was in made it useless, and every movement only made them tighten their grip. They dragged me off the bed and forced me to stand even though I could not balance properly, and I struggled to stay upright while they moved across the room. I had no way to predict where they were taking me, which made it harder to react. At that point, the situation had fully shifted. They forced me into a chair in another room, and when they removed the blindfold, I saw 3 men standing around me, all with their faces covered. I looked around quickly for her, but she was not there, and that confirmed she had been part of this from the beginning. That realization hit harder than anything else. Everything had been planned around me. Before anything else happened, one of them stepped forward and asked about my crypto accounts in a direct tone without wasting time on anything else. I tried to answer in a way that it would give me time, but the moment I slowed down, the first hit came hard enough to break my focus. They brought my phone and forced me to unlock it. And I did it because I understood that resisting would only make things worse. As I opened each wallet and account, one of them recorded the process while another watched closely to make sure I followed every instruction. I hesitated once, trying to think of a way to stop what was happening. But that hesitation was answered immediately, and I understood there was no space to delay. Every transfer was done under their supervision, and I watched the balances drop to zero while they moved from one account to another without stopping. The process was fast and organized, and it felt like something they had done many times before. By the end, everything was gone, and I was still tied to a chair with no control over what would happen next. After the transfers, they forced me to delete every app and account connected to my crypto activity, making sure nothing remained that could be used later. I followed every step because I had no other option, and they checked everything carefully once I finished. The situation slowed down for a moment, and they stepped back slightly as if deciding what to do next. I stayed completely still while they exchanged short comments between themselves. One of them decided I was not worth keeping, and the others agreed without hesitation, which made it clear how little control I had left. The next moment came fast, and the impact to my head ended everything. I woke up outside a building I did not recognize with my hands partially tied and my phone next to me. It took time to understand where I was and what had happened, and when I checked the phone, everything was gone, including every app and account I had used for years. The money was already out of reach. I reported everything, but I already knew how it would go, because operations like this are planned to leave almost nothing behind. Her profile disappeared within days, until the justice was finally made.
An OnlyFans content creator was allegedly involved in a setup that led to a violent robbery targeting a crypto trader who was attacked for around $150,000 in digital assets. According to reports, 4 suspects tracked and ambushed the victim. They beat and threatened him until he gave them access to his crypto wallets. The attackers acted in a coordinated way, suggesting prior planning and inside information.
If you ever think you really know the person you live with, watch what happens when they stop looking at you the way they used to, because that is where everything starts to fall apart. Mara and I had been living together for 2 years. There was a time when that felt enough for both of us without needing anything else. But that changed slowly in ways that were easy to ignore at first. She started smiling more, but not with me. And she spent more time on her phone, reacting to things I couldn't see while I sat next to her waiting for her attention. The moment that stayed with me happened one night when I stood in front of her, trying to talk, and she kept looking at her screen with that same smile, completely unaware that I was there. I didn't say anything, but something in me understood that I was already being replaced by something I didn't fully understand yet. That night she told me about her account. She'd been using the platform for a while now because her self-esteem was really low and her life lacked excitement. But now she feels desires and truly feels good for the first time in years. Hearing her say that broke my heart. I couldn't believe it. About OnlyFans, she said she wasn't asking for permission and that I needed to respect her decision even if I didn't like it. After that, her mood improved in a way that didn't include me, and that contrast made everything worse. She laughed more, dressed differently, and moved with confidence, but she spent less time with me, and it felt like her real life had moved somewhere else, somewhere I couldn't follow. And that was the point where I made a decision that I told myself I wouldn't regret, even though I already knew I would. I told myself I wouldn't look at her profile, but that decision didn't last, because the curiosity turned into something stronger that didn't let me focus on anything else. One night, while she was asleep next to me, I searched for her account and found it in seconds. And I stayed there staring at her profile longer than I expected. When I finally paid for the subscription and opened the first video, I felt something shift inside me because the way she looked at the camera was not something I had ever seen before. It wasn't just how she looked. It was how intentional everything felt, like she was giving something away that I didn't have access to anymore. After that, I started checking her account every day, watching every video and reading every comment. And the more I saw, the worse I felt, but I still couldn't stop. I created a fake account and started interacting with her, asking for things that reminded me of what we used to have. And when she responded once, it was enough to keep me hooked. What do you want exactly? I stared at that message for a long time before answering, trying to find something that didn't sound desperate. Something real, not just for everyone. She liked the message, and that smaller reaction felt bigger than it should have because it gave me the illusion that I was still reaching her somehow. And that illusion is what kept me going, even when everything inside of me was telling me to stop. I kept talking to her for weeks. It was my way of getting closer to her again. But one night, everything changed. Hours passed without any message from her. I walked around the apartment without doing anything specific, checking my phone again and again, trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. At some point, I stopped moving and just stared at my phone, waiting for something to happen, and that was when the notification appeared. It came from the fake account, and it said she uploaded a new video. And for a moment, I hesitated because something about the timing didn't make sense. I opened the video slowly, expecting something normal. But the moment it started, I understood that this was different. She was sitting on a chair with her hands tied behind her back and her legs secured, and there was something in her mouth stopping her from speaking clearly while she looked directly at the camera with clear fear in her eyes. And that was the moment where I realized I wasn't watching content anymore. Before anything else happened, she tried to move the chair and failed. And the sound of it scraping against the floor made everything feel real in a way I couldn't ignore. She kept shaking her head and making muffled sounds, and I leaned closer to the screen trying to understand if this was staged or something else entirely. The man stepped into the frame, moving in a calm and controlled way that made everything worse, because he didn't need to rush or exaggerate anything. He stood next to her and placed his hands on her shoulder, and when she tried to pull away, he held her in place without effort. You ignored me when I asked you directly. You thought this would stay online and never reach you. You gave everyone something except me. His voice sounded distorted, but there was emotion behind it, something personal that made it harder to listen to. He grabbed her hair and forced her to face the camera, and she started crying harder while trying to speak through the gag, moving her body in short attempts to break free. He took a knife from his pocket and held it close to her neck while continuing to speak in a tone that felt controlled but intense. If I don't get what I want, then nobody gets anything. This ends here, and everyone watching will remember it. He pressed the blade against her neck and dragged it across slowly, and the sound that followed made everything feel immediate and real. Her body reacted in short movements, and her eyes stayed open while the focus in them faded. And I watched that change happen without being able to look away. My beautiful woman, the love of my life, was gone forever. I left the apartment and went straight to the police, trying to explain what I had seen while showing them the video, but my words didn't come out clearly. They asked me to sit down while they checked things, and I stayed there trying to process what had just happened. The next thing I remember clearly is waking up in my bed the following morning, and that didn't match what I thought had happened. When I got up, I went to the laundry and I found clothes covered in blood. Before I can process it, the doorbell rang. And when I opened the door, the police were there again, but this time their tone was different. They asked me to come with them and at the station. And that's when I realized what was happening. I remembered the part I wish I could forget. It was me all along. I became obsessed with his attention and everything became distorted. The last thing I remember is when she looked directly at me for a second, and even without seeing my face, she understood exactly who was behind the mask. All I can say is, I'm sorry. Today I'm serving my sentence. I was arrested for manslaughter and diagnosed with bipolar disorder. I'm undergoing treatment, but it's nothing more than endless torture. remembering every day how I lost you, Maria. Mercedes Moore was murdered in her home by a man who had become fixated on her online presence. The attacker broke into her residence, killed her, and then took his own life. This case highlights how digital exposure can sometimes attract dangerous individuals, turning admiration into violent obsession. What you're about to hear is how my career and my life were ruined in a matter of seconds. It was a lot of money. The client paid me $11,000 for a fetish session, where I took him to the extreme while everything was recorded. I built my entire life around saying yes more often than other people, and that made me successful in a way that felt stable at the time. I had rules, or at least I thought I did, and I believed I could manage any situation as long as I stayed calm and controlled the environment. That brief moment made me accept things I shouldn't have accepted, and it made me ignore warning signs that were obvious once everything was over. He didn't start with requests, which is what made him stand out immediately, because most clients want attention the moment they pay. He sent large amounts of money without saying anything, and at first, I thought it was just someone trying to get noticed in a different way. That went on for weeks, and every time I saw his name, I knew another payment was coming, which slowly made me stop questioning it. Instead of being careful, I got used to it, and that's where things started going wrong. When he finally sent a message, it was simple and direct, asking for a private session with no limits, and I remember reading it again because something about it didn't feel like a normal request. I tried to push him away by setting a price that usually ended conversations, but he agreed immediately and paid everything up front. That changed the situation completely, because now I wasn't just considering the idea. I had already accepted it. Before agreeing to anything, there was a moment where I thought about blocking him and refunding the money, because I didn't like how quiet he had been. That thought didn't last long because I started thinking about how much I would lose. He told me he wanted it live and in person, and I convinced myself I could handle it as long as I controlled the setup, which is the same thing I had told myself before every bad decision I made. When he walked into my apartment, the first thing I noticed was how little he reacted to anything around him. I kept talking while setting up the camera and lights, explaining things that didn't need explanation. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask questions, and didn't engage with anything I said, which made every second feel longer than it should have. Once the stream started, viewers joined quickly, and that pressure made it harder to stop, even if I wanted to. At first, he gave instructions in a calm voice, and I followed them while trying to keep things within limits that I knew were safe. The problem was that he didn't react to anything, not to me, not to the situation, and that made it harder to understand what he actually wanted. Before things escalated, there was a long moment where he just stood there without moving, and I asked if everything was okay. He answered briefly without emotion and told me to continue, which forced me to keep going without clarity. That's when I started to feel actual fear because I realized I was the only one making decisions in a situation I didn't fully understand. The shift into something dangerous didn't happen suddenly. It built slowly through smaller changes that made everything harder to control. He asked for tighter restraints and less room for adjustment, and I followed those instructions while trying to keep things manageable. The problem was that every step made it harder to fix anything if something went wrong, and I knew that while I was doing it. Before the next request, there was a long silence where I looked at the camera, then at him, trying to decide if I should stop the session. The chat was active, the money was still coming in, and everything looked controlled from the outside, which made it harder to justify ending it. I hesitated, but I didn't act, and that hesitation is something I still think about. When he asked for the plastic on his head, I didn't respond immediately, and he noticed that pause in a way that made the situation feel more tense. I tried to shift the session into something safer, but he reminded me of the agreement in a calm voice that didn't leave room for negotiation. And that's when he threatened to reveal a deeply personal secret from my teenage years that would destroy my entire empire. At that moment, I knew there was no way out, so I did everything in my power to make sure that man didn't say a single word. So I decided to go ahead with the customer's request. The moment everything went wrong didn't come with a clear signal. It happened in a way that forced me to notice something was off before I understood it completely. I realized he had stopped responding, and at first, I thought it was intentional because of the context. I called out to him, expecting an answer, but nothing came back, and that silence felt different from before. Before reacting, I hesitated for a moment, trying to convince myself it was still under control, because accepting the truth meant everything had already gone too far. I moved closer and called again, louder this time, but there was still nothing. That's when the situation stopped feeling manageable. I started removing the plastic quickly, but it was harder than I expected, and my hands kept slipping while I tried to pull it apart. I wasn't thinking about the stream anymore. I was focused on getting a response. When I finally cleared his face, the lack of movement was immediate and obvious. Before checking his breathing, I paused for a second because I already knew what I was about to confirm. I checked anyway, and when I realized there was nothing, I tried to fix it without knowing if I was doing it right. I kept trying because stopping meant accepting what had happened. After that, everything felt automatic, like I was moving without thinking because processing it felt impossible. I turned off the stream, called for help, and tried to explain what happened even though my thoughts were disorganized. My voice sounded different, and I had to repeat things because I couldn't focus properly. Before anyone arrived, there was a stretch of time where I was alone in the room, and somehow I felt a sense of relief. I kept looking at him, expecting movement even though I knew there wouldn't be any. That waiting made everything feel more real. When the police arrived, they took control quickly and started asking questions, and I answered as much as I could. After everything ended, I tried to move on, but it didn't work the way I expected because the situation stayed with me. People saw me differently, and that never really changed. Before I accepted it, I focused on the panic because it was easier than looking at my decisions. Over time, I realized the important part wasn't the panic. It was the moment before everything went wrong. That moment changed everything. I swear to God it wasn't on purpose. I didn't mean to do it, but at the same time, I felt like in that moment, I saw a chance to save my secret. A secret that would die with me. The case of Michaela Rylarsdom is a disturbing example of how extreme online fantasies can turn deadly in real life. She was accused of killing a client during a recorded fetish session, in which he had paid large sums for dangerous acts involving suffocation. What was meant to be consensual content escalated into a fatal situation, blurring the line between performance and reality.
I used to think the worst part of OnlyFans was creepy messages, but one night, a subscriber sent me something. That proved he wasn't watching my content. He was watching me. My name is Alyssa. I started OnlyFans about a year ago. At first, it was just for extra income, nothing extreme, just lifestyle content, chatting, requests. Most subscribers were normal, some weird, but manageable, until one account appeared. Username, Watcher_47. No profile picture, no bio. He didn't ask for anything. He just tipped a lot. $100, $200, sometimes $500 at a time. At first, I thought I got lucky, until the messages started. His first message was simple. You should close your curtains at night. I froze. I looked behind me. My curtains were open. I laughed it off. Maybe a guess. Then another message came. Blue looks good on you? I was wearing a blue shirt, not posted, not recorded, just live. That's when my stomach dropped. I replied, Do you know me? He didn't answer. Instead, he sent a photo. It was my apartment building, taken from outside, at night, my window clearly visible. After that, things escalated. He knew when I ordered food, when I turned off lights, even when I wasn't online. Every message felt like he was right outside, watching, waiting. One night, I got a message at exactly 2:13 a.m. Don't turn around. My heart stopped. I was sitting on my bed, facing the wall. Slowly, I felt it, that feeling, like someone was behind me. I grabbed my phone tighter. Another message. Too late. I turned around, and the front door was slightly open. I was sure I locked it. I stood up slowly and walking toward it. Every step felt wrong. Then suddenly, my phone buzzed again. A photo. It was me, standing, in that exact moment, taken from inside my apartment. Twist ending, 6:10 to 7. I don't remember what happened after that. The police report says I disappeared that night. No forced entry, no struggle, just gone. My phone was found on the floor, still open, still logged in. That account, Watcher_47, it's still active, still tipping, still messaging. Other creators now report receiving the same texts. And the last message sent from my account wasn't written by me. It said, "I found someone new to watch.